I think that the organizers of this meeting are to be congratulated on their brio and also, I think, on their timing. We are met today as witnesses of the decomposition of a political regime in this capital city, which uses the language of capitalism and of free enterprise, employs the ideology of selfishness and self-interest, and stresses the rhetoric of laissez-faire, while bloating and expanding the role of the state, debauching the treasury and the currency, and relying upon a state within a state for the secret conduct of most policy. There may, and I think there will not be, any convergence of ideas between socialist and capitalist schools this evening, but this need not prevent us, I think, from seeing that a regime may combine the basest features of statism and collectivism with the basest elements of utilitarianism and libertarianism too. And I think if we recognize that, we may have ground for debate. What is it, I better get on with it, to be a socialist? Necessary conditions in my submission, rather than sufficient ones, must include the following. It is necessary to hold, firstly, that all divisions of class, nation, race, and sex are, in the last resort, man-made and can be man-unmade, are in no sense part of a divine or natural ordinance, and that we are members, like it or no, of one race, the human race. That civilization is, in fact, second, a cooperative enterprise, whether the cooperation is coerced, as it was in most of recorded history, or voluntary, as has been occasionally found and can still be found in our century. But that it is a cooperative enterprise cannot be denied. There is no other means, that's to say, of civilization. Third, that the limits of creative endeavor are set by the limits of nature, and that very few human actions can therefore be said in the last instance to be entirely private. The earth is, in point of fact, a common treasury, as the English levelers used to say in the Puritan Revolution, hoping that it were so. It is, in fact, the case, and again, whether we like it or not, whether we care to treat it as such or not. Fourth, that there is no God and no supernatural, that this recognition obliges us morally to maximize the felicity of the one life that we are permitted.
Well, no, this person's a leftist. I don't have to listen to them.
And fifth, that the principle of from each according to his ability or her ability, and to each according to his or her need, is an easily realizable one, prefigured already in human society by the working principles of the bourgeois family. That unique engine of thrift, enterprise, the transmission of morality, operates precisely on the principle of from each according to his or her ability and to each according to his or her need. There is, in fact, no other way that a family could decently or possibly be run. I make no moral judgment as between the decency and the possibility. Such a distinction would be odious.
Because they're from the Republican Party. Their whole modus operandi is to maintain the status quo, to enforce more government regulation. You know, they pride themselves against small government. Name one Republican administration in which the government shrank.
Marxists describe freedom as the recognition of necessity, and only then proceed to say that the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all, a stipulation that obviously implies its corollary, that the educator must be educated. That's why I stress the above as necessary conditions rather than sufficient ones. We do not ask for these things to be true. We might even prefer them not to be, but we must recognize them as given and as such. Sufficient conditions, I think, center on the question of class. Marxists recognize that history is indeed the contest of competing social forces, and that so is the present such a competition. All attempts to describe society as merely organic and harmonious, or as a free competition or race between individuals with differing attainments and endowments, fail, because they ignore this simple and obvious fact, which again we do not preach, we simply recognize, insist upon, and make as a point of departure. We do not preach morality at all. They do not put to people the moral demand, love one another, do not be egotists, etc. On the contrary, they are very well aware that egoism, just as much as selflessness, is in definite circumstances a necessary form of the self-assertion of individuals. I think this shows clearly enough that Marxists understand what Randians term, as if they discovered it, the virtue of selfishness. But as Marx and Engels also wrote in the same period in their Holy Family, they saw the need for selfishness to be transcended. I'm quoting again directly from the Holy Family, 1845 also. If enlightened self-interest is the principle of all morality, man's private interest must be made to coincide with the interest of humanity. If man is shaped by environment, his environment must be made human. It is on this apparent paradox that we take our stand. And against the neo-Kantians, the early Marxists argued that morality could not be derived from abstract first principles of recht or right, but had to correspond to the real conditions of society. Nowadays, I think this argument seems quaint in its intensity and fervor, because evolution itself, and specifically the evolution of modern capitalism into a new symbiosis with the state, has borne in upon the dullest mind the recognition that if humanity does not yet think in terms of a common destiny, it has at least had to think in terms of a common fate.
They don't have new ideas. That is the purview of the other team.
To put it at its most vulgar materialist level, we are all collectivized by the same ozone layer. The thermonuclear world is a great leveler, and just as there can be no purely moral, conscientious objection in a thermonuclear conflict, nor can there be any merely ethical or self-interested collaboration with it. Everybody, after all, in this auditorium is a uniformed conscript. You cannot conscientiously object to the nuclear conscription that has made of each of you soldiers and put you in the front line while the real soldiers are in the bunker. This recognition of reality enforces a sense of collective humanity upon us. Again, we do not preach this, we recognize it. Socialism, said Oscar Wilde, would free us from the distressing necessity of living for others.
You can just take your microphone off and throw it down, not listen. That bumper sticker politics. To shut down and immediately not debate.
The feelings of compassion and solidarity and responsibility, after all, are no less instinct in our species than those of self-interest. It's precisely because these instincts of solidarity and compassion represent a human need, a need to be of help to others, a point very well made by Professor Richard Titmuss in his famous book, The Gift Relationship. Because they are a need, there is no need to make the sentimental presumption of altruism or to wrestle with the tautology that altruism represents. And in fact, few proponents of the capitalist system have ever summarized its virtues, those of creativity, innovation, the bursting of feudal and antique tribal fetters, as well as Marx did.
And it's all about that now. And the reality is, right, left, red, and blue. The liberal movement within whatever country it is.
But Marx and Engels also saw what's since become obvious, that capitalism is not the last word, and that in freeing mankind from ancient obligations, it made him a prisoner of market forces which also developed their own mythology and ideology, their own mystification, and their own bondage. I also believe that capitalism is the harbinger of socialism, that it's necessary not merely to contest or negate its ethical claims, but to transcend them, to build upon them. And from this, if I may coin a phrase, dialectic, I think we might get a truly human and unillusioned morality that was free from superstition.
Even if you're a political pundit with millions of followers.
On that realizable aspiration, I rest my case. Thank you.
I hope this isn't the last time you will join me, because I'd love to hear more of your thoughts. Thank you so much.
But the key thing that we need to take away from this video, I mean, other than the laughs, but that's not saying much.
The thing is, what the scientists will give you is calculations and and theories, and we're supposed to believe the calculations rather than what we experience ourselves.